Okay, well, good morning, everybody, and thank you, and welcome to the Scottish Parliament. My name's Jeremy Balfour, and I'm a member of the Scottish Parliament, and I have the privilege of being the convener of a cross-party group on disability. And I want to welcome you to the Festival of Politics, where we expect some interesting discussion, inspiring thoughts, and a place over the next couple of days where people can share different views. I look forward to this discussion from everyone throughout the views, but it's really important that we do this in a safe place. So even if you don't agree with everybody, let's do it in a way that is respectful at all times. We're delighted you can join to participate in this discussion around does transport work for disabled people in Scotland? And this has been run by the Scottish Parliament and by the cross-party group on disability together. And it's an opportunity for us to hear from a few individuals, to give them some questions, but also for you to put your points and your questions later on. I have no idea how this works, but if you want to put it on Twitter, you can put your remarks at Visit Scottish Parliament, or if you're very trendy, you can go to Instagram and do at Scottish Parliament and put comments there as well. We have, I'm pleased to say, 2 people in the room and 1 person smiling at me on a screen. I'm going to, rather than me talk to who they are, I'm just going to ask if they can introduce themselves. So I'm going to start with Zara, just to say very briefly who you are, and we'll move on from there.
So I'm Zara Todd. I'm based in Edinburgh, and I'm the convener of Disability Equality Scotland, an organisation of disabled people that campaigns for an accessible Scotland for all.
Great. And then we've got Benita, who's next to me.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Bettina Seisland. I'm a Director of Bus Accessibility and Active Travel in Transport Scotland, which is part of Scottish Government. So we're a devolved administration, but some of the responsibilities and legislation are reserved to UK Government. Within my remit, I also cover concessionary travel schemes and smart ticketing. Thank you.
Great. And then last but not least, Tanny.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Tanny Gray-Thompson. I'm a Welsh person living in England. I'm a Paralympian. I competed at 5 games, and now I'm a crossbench peer in the House of Lords, and I work around lots of issues on disability and particularly transport. And I just want to say thank you for letting me do this online. Actually, this year I've only been at my house at home for 52 nights, so it's lovely in the recess to be able to spend a bit of time with my husband. Not sure he entirely agrees with that, but no, thank you for letting me do this online. I really appreciate it.
Great, thank you. So as I said, what I'm going to do is kick us off with some questions, and then come to you, the audience. And if you got a question, put your hand up in due course. So let me start with a really general question, if I can, and that is, how would you describe your experience of public transport, and what is going well in Scotland or the UK, and what is going maybe less well? Does someone want to jump in on that one?
I can.
Yep.
So I'm going to talk about my members' experience of using transport as well as a bit of my own. So Disability Equality Scotland members generally have difficulty accessing transport options. They have challenges around getting transport to and from medical appointments, and issues around particularly staff attitude and training. For Disability Equality Scotland, we would like discussions around transport to think about travel rather than just getting on a bus, because actually for the majority of our members, the biggest challenge in their journey is getting from their front door to the bus stop or the train station. And so there are lots of challenges around the reliability of service, that people understand how they can support disabled people to be on transport. And there are lots of issues around actually being able to walk and wheel around our cities. So a lot of disabled people feel that they are a long way from their towns and cities because of transport options. Something that I think is working really, really well, and I'm a little bit biased because I'm based in Edinburgh, is the pavement parking ban that we've seen rolled out in Edinburgh has really made a substantial difference to a lot of disabled people, and it's something that would be really great if it was rolled out into other parts of Scotland. Yeah.
Great. Tani, I don't know if you want to come in at this point.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I live in the northeast of England. I live 300 miles from London, and I take about 450 long train journeys a year. That doesn't include sort of the 20 minutes sort of local stuff. So I'd say most of my personal experience is fine. I've had a number of really bad experiences where I've been left on trains and had to crawl off, and done a bit of angry social media posting about that. Because when companies say to me, so what is it that you want? My response is, I want the same miserable experience of commuting as everyone else. And I don't have that. So most of my journeys are fine, but it's that kind of worry about, you know, do I have to beg to get on? Do you have to justify booking? Is someone going to meet me at the other end? And I have a platform where I'm treated better than anybody else I know who's disabled, and it's still not right. So I do use buses, but in London, and you know, there it's different to where I live in London. If you can't get on a bus because it's full, or there's a pram in the space, or there's a bus 7 minutes later. Where I live in England, the next bus is an hour and a half later. So for me, there's still a long way to go on training, understanding, and exactly what's been said before. You know, it's we've got to think about this door to door. We've got to think about drop curbs. We've got to think about, you know, things like, you know, A-boards outside shops, about actually how people can get to the public transport. I would love to see a ban on pavement parking in the whole of the UK, and that's something I'm working on at the moment. But I think the reality is disabled people, you know, it is still a struggle. We're still, you know, if you look at things like freedom passes, you know, we're not expected to travel at the same time as everyone else. I did have an experience a little while ago on the tube. I have to say, it was 7:30 in the morning. I was trying to get on the tube, and a member of staff stopped me and said, "It's really busy." Like, yeah, 7:30. And you say all these things in your head. You know, 7:30 in the morning. And he was like, "It's rush hour." Yeah. And he was like, no, maybe you want to travel later. I was like, no, I've got to get to work. Well, you've got a job. Yeah, I've got a job. Oh, lovely. Oh, that's so lovely that you've got a job. Yeah. And, you know, I'm outwardly very polite, hopefully. And he was like, oh, what do you do? So I was like, I work in Westminster. Oh, that's lovely. Do you answer the phones? And it's like, yeah, well, I also answer the phones. And so the wider bit about, you know, just expecting disabled people to travel, to have jobs, to be going to spend money, we still haven't got that connection right. And it's still, I don't think, as easy as it should be for everyone. There's pockets of really good practice. You know, in Wales, Transport for Wales have started buying low-floor trains, which is so exciting to be able to just get on a train and get off a train. But that is still a bit more of an oddity than the norm.
Okay, thank you. I wonder if I can move it on slightly and come to kind of the Transport Scotland issue. And that is, what current projects are Transport Scotland working on which will improve accessibility across the country? And is technology going to help us going forward in regard to that?
So, thank you. I think everything we do is funneled through the Accessible Travel Framework, which is our main policy document. We started that in 2016. It's a 10-year document and policy, and it finishes in 2026. So we'll be looking at what the sort of future looks like. Within that, I think there are things that we're proud of. Such as the ban on pavement parking. We've done quite a lot of work with ScotRail on making sure that disabled people are able to get on a train and call up somebody to get on if it's planned within an hour, but also there's the turn up and go facility as well. And there's also more particular to Scotland, I guess, the ferries accessibility fund, which does look at that, how you get on a ferry from the port, what the sort of like full journey looks like. So there are things that I think have gone well and that we're really proud of, but I think we'd all accept in this room that there's a long way to go to make sure that disabled people have the same freedom and access to transport and to services and where they need to go as everybody does, and that's as it should be. So that's why we're looking at those future plans. In terms of how technology can help, we were having an interesting conversation before we came on this platform, and Jeremy was talking about some of the experiences he had in America of driverless cars and the autonomous cars, and that's something that we had looked at for buses, but I think sort of like it has to be part of a sort of potential future. The other technology that we're looking at is the applications, making sure that before you set off on your journey, you know where the dropped curves are, you know how you're going to get from your door to the door of where you're going. And we've been working closely with Des and Max, which is the Mobility and Access Committee, to get that facility right in our web. But I think part of the reason I'm here this morning is really to sort of listen and learn more about what we need to put into the next phase of our accessible travel framework.
Brilliant. If I can move us on, so I can come to you. Disability Equality Scotland help around transport. You do a lot of work. What are your frustrations? Some of it you've already raised. What are your frustrations? And how do we as a disability community engage better with Scottish, UK government? Because some of them is devolved, some of them are reserved. How do we do it as a community engage better with government?
So I know a lot of people in the room are disabled people, so this is going to feel a bit tiresome. But actually sharing our experiences of when things go right as well as when things go wrong, listening to Tanny and just my own personal experience, there are lots of really good examples of good practice around transport accessibility, from audio announcements on buses to good staff training and helpful staff to level boarding. One of the problems is, for disabled people, it's not consistent. So every time you go on a journey, you have to plan it much more than a non-disabled person, because you have to be ready for the wheelchair space to be occupied, or the bus not to turn up, or the person on the bus not to tell you what bus number it is. So you have to be more organised. And then there's always the kind of the unknown of, for disabled people when we're travelling, in a large number of cases, we're really dependent on the human beings that are operating the transport. So you can have fully accessible infrastructure, but if a bus driver moans about getting the ramp out for you to get on the bus, it then becomes a very problematic journey. One of our members, when responding to a recent survey about their experience on transport, was sharing an example from Glasgow where they got on a bus, or they tried to get on a bus, and throughout the entire process of someone putting the ramp down, they complained about having to do it, that disabled people had the audacity to travel, and then they complained to the other passengers on the bus, that person then didn't want to go on that bus or take that journey. And it's really great to hear about Turn Up and Go, and like the assistance app has made things a lot better, and things can be done quicker. The number of times I, for example, go to a train station, ask to get on a train, and rather than, yes, we can help you with that, the first question I get asked is, have you booked assistance? And that actually, while I understand there's a procedure around that, what that says is, am I really allowed to be here? And I think that's a really fundamental challenge around, do disabled people feel like transport providers and transport staff actually want us to be on the transport? And a lot of the time, staff's attitude towards us then affects how other passengers relate to us. So if a bus driver is moaning about having to do something or making a fuss about saying what number it is, the rest of the passengers on the bus are going to be like, oh, this person's holding up my journey, rather than this person needs to go somewhere and live life and do stuff.
Okay, I'm hoping Tanya's just going to get an Amazon package because she's disappeared off screen. Because I was going to come to her next, but I'll move on. One of my bugbears, so this is my own kind of bugbear, is floating bus stop. Oh, welcome back. Hopefully you got a good Amazon package out of that. We'll come back to you in a moment, Tanya, but one of my bugbears is floating bus stops and the difficulty people have accessing buses. I wonder from a Transport Scotland perspective, and I know it's devolved to local government to actually implement it, but what kind of thought has been given to that around people with visual impairment, people with wheelchairs, other people who just find it really difficult to know, how do I cross safely?
So, if I start off with active travel, I think one of the things that we've been really successful with in active travel is getting an increase in funding. And, you know, the provision we've made there is to improve cycling, wheeling and walking for everybody. And, you know, hopefully you've seen, you know, as you've walked around Edinburgh, but more broadly, you know, sort of like the value of the investment there and how it's improved that facility. One of the challenges we've had as we've improved that infrastructure and we've improved that facility is what do we do with the bus stops? So if you know, put in the cycling routes and you make it faster and more convenient for cyclists, obviously you've got the issue then of what you do with the bus stops. Now, the way we tackled that in Scotland was to produce a sort of design manual called Cycling by Design. And that sets out a process for local authorities to make sure that they consult very early on with disabled people and disabled groups to make sure that bus stop is in the right location and is safe to use. I think from what you've said, Jeremy, and you know what we've seen in Edinburgh, but more broadly, it's proved controversial. You know, sort of like, and you know, sort of like at times dangerous for people with the bus stops, and so we are going to be reviewing our cycling design by design manual to see what improvements we need to make. We're not alone in doing this. Obviously, there's activity going on in England as part of the UK government as well. They're also reviewing, you know, sort of like what should be done in terms of bus stops. But it's one of those things that does need to be looked at in more detail.
And can disabled people be involved in that process?
Yeah. So you'll be, we can't do it without, you know, sort of like it's. When we originally did the work, disabled people were involved, but I think, you know, we need to sort of like reopen that and look at that again.
Perfect, great.
And that's intention.
Thank you. Tanya, can I come back to you? And this is about how do we get change and how is the disability community involved in that process? From your experience, both as a parliamentarian, but also as a heavy lobbyist. What's your advice to groups, individuals, about how we can actually see real change around transport? Oh, now hang on, you're mute. Have we got a
Thank you.
Oh.
Yeah, no, sorry. Sorry, I just need to explain where I went as well. Apologies, my husband got locked in the garage and I wasn't going to get an Amazon parcel. He was shouting, so I unmuted because I was shouting back to him and had to go and get a knife to unlock the door, so sorry. Thought I'd explain. It can be really hard as an individual disabled person because every time something goes wrong, it's not particularly easy to complain. And so it's having the time to do it, but it's also having the time to say when things go right. And I think that can be a real challenge. I think the complexity of the system doesn't make it easy because, especially if you look at rail, if there's a failure point, it's trying to figure out, who do you get in touch with? Do you get in touch with a train company? Is it Network Rail? Is it ScotRail? Is it who's doing the assistance? Where does the system fall down? And I think that can be really kind of difficult. I was dealing with a case recently of someone who was taking 3 trains from Scotland into England, and there were multiple fail points. And actually, it turns out there were 6 different organisations that we had to get in touch with to try and figure out and get the information to people. So I think that can be exhausting. I think where it does work well, where there's really strong panels of disabled people and they talk about that lived experience and they're able to feed in, that does depend on the chairs of those panels. Not being afraid to rock the boat a little bit and to push and to challenge. And I think there's a bit of still an elephant in the room. A lot of these panels are still disabled people being asked to be volunteers. So, the number of times that, disabled people are asked to give their expertise for nothing, I think is quite a challenge. And, I think a colleague of mine who does, a lot of work in this space is not paid. And, it's kind of fine for him. He's got a pension and he sees it as giving back. But a lot of disabled people can't do that. And, I think that voice of disabled people is very important. Just picking up on the, the floating bus stops, we're looking at that through Westminster. And I sort of do vaguely understand why they were designed that way. But there's 2 floating bus stops very close to Westminster Parliament, and they are by a hospital, and they are so dangerous. And I think something else we need to tackle again. Sorry, because this is all ends up being joined together, but on the streetscape is illegal e-bikes and things like that. That they make it a real challenge as well. For disabled people. I saw a wheelchair user being very close to being hit by a bike running a red light at beyond 30 miles an hour. So there are all these sort of things that then make it hard for disabled people to just get out and do the things that they need to do. What I'd love, the companies, is to do more. Like a lot of the time we hear, we're doing what we have to. And I would love for them to do more so that they make it easier. It's not just what they legally have to get away with doing. It's kind of just do better, because certainly in terms of trains, Disability Discrimination Act said all trains would be step free by January the 1st 2020. It's now going to be 100 years. So I haven't got time to wait 100 years to be able to get on and off a train. And the same for, next 3 or 4 generations behind me, they're not going to be able to get on a train. So, that's just not good enough, really.
Sure, yeah.
So, a little plug for Des. If you're a disabled person living in Scotland, Disability Equality Scotland is free to join. Going on from what Tanny says, when you're trying to deal with a system that fundamentally isn't designed for you, it can be exhausting. So finding other people that can amplify your voice, amplify your experience, and do some of the campaigning work for you is really important. If Disability Equality Scotland isn't your bag, there's also Transport for All. Both organisations are constantly in contact with all of the transport infrastructure to try and make things better. And what helps is people's lived experience. And one of the things about being part of organisations is because you won't be the only person that's experienced this. Organisations already know who the press points are, like who is the person you need to speak to actually get this dealt with and acknowledged properly. So, like, find organisations that represent your needs and interests and engage with them, join them and share your experience. Let them take some of the burden of like constantly fighting to exist, and also strengthen them by, like, if you've got a really positive experience or advice for someone, a lot of disabled people are nervous to travel. They're nervous to use transport. And I completely understand it as a disabled person. When things go wrong, it's like, like, why am I doing this to myself? It's like a form of, like, self-agreeing torture. But actually, where you've had good experiences, where you found things that work, where you found people that are good at their jobs, we should be sharing that information with people so that other people can, like, live life. Like, transport isn't the end objective. We're using transport to do stuff. And so when transport isn't working, it's keeping disabled people out of society. And that's why it's so important that we campaign and we pressurise and we make sure that transport is constantly being revised with us in mind. The system might not have been built for disabled people, but any adaptation, any change, any new infrastructure that's put in should be considering disabled people. And it's a really big challenge. Like, I remember being told by, like, a rail authority, we're not making this station accessible because our data says no disabled people use it. Now, no disabled people use it because it isn't accessible. And that's one of the biggest challenges sometimes. To make the case to make something accessible can be really difficult because people aren't using it because it's not. And so that's really important. And the last thing I would say is one of the biggest things I've experienced and Des's members have experienced is actually the infrastructure, the physical stuff is only half the story. One of the really big important things is making sure that there's accessible information, and I mean accessible in the broadest sense, about what the transport options are, because if you don't know what your transport options are, you're not going to just randomly go and stand next to your nearest bus stop and hope that it's going in the direction that you want to go.
Excellent. Okay, I'm going to move us on, and I've got one more question, and then I'm going to hand it over to you, the audience, so please do get your thinking caps on. I should have also said that if you prefer to use BSL, we have a BSL interpreter, I think, in the room. Yes. So if you'd prefer to ask your question through BSL, then we can definitely, hopefully, facilitate that. My final question is trying to be a positive question. What gives you hope for transport around disability going forward for the next 5-10 years? I'll just run down the panel. One thing or two things that gives you hope that things will get better.
Say that again. What do I hope?
Or what gives you hope?
What gives me hope?
What do you think can change around transport to make it better for people with disability?
So I mean, you know, we've got a long way to go, and I understand that. I do think that we've had some successes. We've talked about, you know, what some of those successes have been. I think that, you know, we have, because we're quite a small country, we have, you know, sort of close connections with the right groups, and that, you know, we've got the ability to respond to, you know, the issues that you know, sort of like are raised, and we've got the ability to respond quite quickly. So I think that gives me hope that although there's a long way to go. We've got those connections, we've got those networks, we've got those relationships that will mean that we're able to work on this and continue to work on this together to get the improvements that we need.
Yeah.
Two things give me hope. Disabled people give me hope because the fact that there are disabled people, as Tani have said, both paid and unpaid, that are constantly raising what's working and what isn't working, and that we come together and we share that and we influence, gives me hope for the future, because the more visible we are, the louder we are, the more they have to listen, and the more that we become an audience that needs to be catered for. The second thing that gives me hope is a little bit weird. I've been disabled all of my life. As you can probably tell from the accent, I didn't grow up in Scotland, but I've been coming to Scotland since I was about 2 years old. The station nearest me, where I live, when I was 2 years old, wasn't accessible. It is now accessible. I remember having to travel as a young wheelchair user in guards vans in trains. I now have a wheelchair space. What gives me hope is what we've already managed to achieve as disabled people in terms of making transport accessible. I have hope because we now have wheelchair spaces on buses. I have hope because we have audio announcements. I have hope because Transport Scotland produce everything in Easy Read now when they're doing policy documents. Now, if I look at my lifetime, that would have been unimaginable when I was born, and yet it's happening now. So the route is progress, I think.
Great. Tani?
Yeah, it's definitely getting better. And, I was the same, growing up. I could never even dreamt of getting on a bus, let alone, being able to use them the way we are now. I think for me, social media has been a real help, and it's a way of sharing information. For me, I post not particularly to make a complaint, but actually to educate non-disabled people. And it's really interesting now that, I get other disabled people saying, non-disabled people have noticed them on trains. I get non-disabled people saying to me, "You're right, do you want me to get anyone?" So it's the number of non-disabled people who've said to me over the year, "I didn't even realise there were steps on trains," because apparently you don't notice them. So, that is really helpful, that there's more non-disabled people willing to step in. And the other thing is we've got legislation in Westminster. Obviously, with stuff that's devolved, it doesn't impact that. But the fact that we've got a chance to really think differently about how public transport is operated. And I always think back to the Tube. The Tube wasn't designed for women, let alone disabled people, and that is changing. For me, if there's one thing we could do, it'd be having integrated budgets. So adaptation is not sort of an add-on. And this is one of the things Transport for London did really well, is whenever they were doing any upgrade work, they always thought about what they could do to make accessibility part of it. It wasn't a separate budget line. I think the reality is, well, we probably need more money. But actually, the benefit for everyone will be huge. So I am positive. Well, there's lots of people who are willing to have the fight and to, keep raising the issues.
Perfect. Right. So now, over to our audience. Hopefully someone has some roving mics, which we're going to hold up. If we can, yep, already got your hands up, and just ask your question. If it's directed at one specific member of the panel, then do that. If not, we'll do this. And we've got about half an hour, so let's see if we can get as many questions in as possible. Well, let's start maybe over here, because I think the lady with the very pink orange, and then we'll go right behind you after that.
Hi, I've got a question for Transport Scotland, which you talk about framework and you talk about the 2026 framework, and you talk about budgets and stuff. Then why are air and our bus backs being cut for budgets? Why now is it too expensive for us to use a bus pass? Where originally it was only £1 to get us to get somewhere, and now we've been told the our local authorities are all folks that have been cut, they've cut the funding. So we're now having to use our disabled welfare, which not a lot of disabled people have. I'm one of the lucky ones that have, but I think that's just, if they want to make transport easy for us, then why has that been cut? Why has the budget been cut for local authorities for our bus bags?
Okay then. Yeah. So I look after concessionary travel schemes, and I'm responsible for the budget on behalf of ministers. We spend over 400, about 410 million per year on concessionary travel, and that is available. Free bus travel is available to almost half the population. It's available to all young people under 22, everybody over 60, and disabled groups. So that we work closely with local authorities to agree the sort of disability criteria. Then, if local authorities alongside us and with additional funding also run their own voluntary concessionary schemes, which provides additional access to some people that fit their criteria to not just bus but train and ferries. And is that, I think that's probably the bit that you're talking about, because we haven't changed our criteria, and we've increased our budget. But local authorities are under a lot of pressure, and I think that's probably what's happened at individual local authority levels. So I don't have an answer for you about what's happened at individual local authority level, but what I can do is go back to our office and see what's going on and what kind of impact it's having on which people.
Great, thank you. The chap just behind you, the lady there with the glasses.
Thank you. Hello, my name's Jordan. I have a learning disability, but I'm also here in my work capacity where I work for a support organisation called Infida Scotland. I'm the Service Quality Director, and the man on my right is Alexander, who is a person supported by us, who's going to share some experience of his experience. We've been doing a lot of work and feedback with people we supported about transport in the local area, and some of the things that people told us, someone made the point earlier about bus drivers complaining when helping people that use wheelchairs on a bus. That's something that's been brought up quite a few times. And that buses only accommodate for one wheelchair at a time. And something that comes up quite rarely is if a pram is on board, someone that is trying to get on the bus that uses a wheelchair cannot get on. And in some cases, people have said that buses just drive right past them. Yeah.
Can I just encourage you, we've got about 8 other people wanting. Can you just ask for a question, do you think? Would it be possible have you got a question you want to ask?
Yeah, it was just how would you improve, how can we improve transport in the local area for disabled people with that feedback?
Thank you. Do you want to jump in?
So I think part of it is letting organisations know and working together as disabled people to highlight bad practice. I know for Disability Equality Scotland, we're quite often talking to Transport Scotland saying that there needs to be better training for staff, because a lot of what you described is people not having the right training or seeing disabled people as a burden, or like that we're going on a nice day out rather than we need to use transport as an essential part of just living our lives. So I think there's something about like complaining and telling people, which is what you're doing here, and it's really important to keep doing that, because I think a lot of the time non-disabled people, even those working in transport, don't realise how ridiculous it can be to try and get around as a disabled person. Like, they know the theory, but actually the practice of like seeing someone being told they're not allowed to get on a bus because the person doesn't know how to use a ramp, or that they aren't willing to be told the bus number because surely you can see the front of the bus. They're things that people would be like, no, that doesn't happen. They've all been trained. And the reality is it does. So the more we can be talking about when things go wrong, and I know that this is a bit boring and a bit geeky, but one of the things I've learnt from working with transport providers and with Transport Scotland is the more detail you can collect on what's happened to you, the more likely they're able to follow up with it. Like, if you know what time you were at a bus stop, if you know like any other information, the more information you have when things go wrong, the more likely it is to be actually caught up with and like followed up, and possibly someone resent on training, or in really bad circumstances let go from their job.
Yeah. Do you?
Yeah, so I think your point about, sort of like the detail and getting in contact with your bus company and a bus operator and saying what's happened is really important. And I think, bus operators want people to use their services, so I think they will respond. But what I wanted to say was about some of the legislation that's been looked at the UK level. So accessibility on buses is reserved to UK government. UK government are currently working through a UK bus bill, which is pretty broad and covers lots of different aspects, including phasing out of diesel buses. But one of the things it does cover is improving accessibility on buses, and the particular aspect it's looking at is bus driver training, and to mandate that. So, where there's, inconsistency, and there's, we've all got plenty of examples where it doesn't work, and we can see that when we get on the bus. But there is, sort of like UK government are looking at legislation to make sure that people are properly trained.
Excellent. I'm going to be a wee bit like Mr. Nasty to our panel as well. I'm going to limit you to literally 2 minutes maximum, because we've got a lot of questions to get through. I think the lady with the glasses with her hand up there, and then we'll come over to this side. Don't worry, I'm not discriminating against my left-wingers.
Hello, thank you. I would like to talk about non- or hidden disabilities. I think the sunflower lanyard has made a big difference. Particularly in the transport area, a lot more operators are aware of it, so that's a positive. However, I am up to autistic, but I have visual problems. I have light sensitivity, and I have been led around train stations and airports into chairs and all sorts of things. So again, it's about getting the operator to understand, and simple training of actually putting them in a wheelchair, giving them a blindfold and being dragged around by somebody else, actually putting them in our shoes, that takes half an hour, in a wheelchair, and half an hour with a blindfold could make a huge amount of difference to the attitude of those operators. My question is, as someone who has photophobia, I am really, really struggling with the modern LED lighting. I am housebound in the winter. I can only go out between 10 and 2. Transport is particularly bad for this. Street lights, car lights, the buses themselves, particularly Edinburgh buses, are lovely. They're brand new, they're fantastic. They are absolutely covered in LED lighting and screens. I have to wear really, really dark glasses, and I don't go out during the winter. It is really, really restrictive for me.
Tani, can I bring you in? Sorry. Sorry, thank you. Sorry. Tani, can we get the legislation changed in the laws?
Sorry, that's it'd be quite nice to do that. I mean, our powers tend to be a little bit limited. I just want to come back on the training bit, because I think we have to train differently, because the ridiculousness of I haven't been trained to use a ramp, or I'm dealing with a case of a member of staff at a train station who hadn't been trained to help a blind person and a guide dog downstairs. It's like, what are we doing not offering this training? I'm not sure about putting people in wheelchairs. There's sometimes I think it has some benefit. I think there's also a bit of a challenge with it, because if they spend half an hour in a chair, they kind of know, they think they know everything about a wheelchair user. So I think we have to just think really differently about training, and just raise the standard of training. And I think, this is one of the interesting things you say about the LED lights. Some of the rules were brought in because it was meant to be helpful to people. And so much of the time there's these unintended consequences which we don't think about. Just really quickly on sunflower lanyards, there's really mixed reaction to them. I've just done a big piece of work in the aviation industry. There's one airport that thinks it's being horrendously misused, because now on certain websites you can buy a sunflower lanyard for 53p. It's not an official one. And, people are using it to get more. So there's some pushback on the sunflower lanyards as well, where people are misusing them. And that's really sad that people are doing that.
Jo.
So I would agree with Taddy. I think rather than putting people in wheelchairs I think the really strong thing to do is actually to go out with disabled people, to try and do stuff with disabled people, because that's something that they then get to see what your experience is like. So if you're having a problem, I would genuinely contact your bus company and say, can the head of operations come on a trip with me and see what I think it's really our experience of disability as disabled people is really complicated. I'm a wheelchair user, but I'm also neurodivergent. That is not something that we can give people the experience of by putting them you can't put a blindfold on someone and make them neurodivergent. It doesn't work like that. But actually, I know. If you try to train 20,000 people, you can't. There are about 16 million disabled people in the UK. So actually, I would go back to where Tani was earlier and say we should be paying disabled people to educate transport staff and other staff in other places about what it means to be accessible, rather than us having to do lots of free labour just to live.
You wanted to quick?
It was just to say that if you have issues like that to raise, it's an ideal time to raise it, because one of the things that UK government's looking at the moment is bus manufacturing, and part of that is looking at inclusive design and looking how to design and standardise buses for the future. And when I talk about the future, I mean, the next 2 years onwards. So not very far future. So they're busy, engaging with all the different groups at the moment. And now's an ideal time to feed that kind of, knowledge and experience in.
Okay, I'm going to come across to this side. We've got 3 or 4 questions. I'm going to start with a young lady with a hand up at the moment, with a blue lanyard around her. And then we'll go to the back, to the young man at the back.
Thank you. What about the people with no freedom to even approach transport? People who are totally innocent and have never committed a crime. For example, people with autism locked up under the Mental Health Act with no basic human rights, not even the right to any freedom.
Yeah, I think that's a whole big issue which deserves its own time. It doesn't really relate to transport, and to be fair, I don't think really anyone on this panel has been prepared to answer the question. I mean, I think it's a very fair question, but maybe for another day. So I can go to the chap at the back who's got his hand up.
So thank you to all the panellists for speaking to us today. And Jeremy, I'm so happy you called me young. I wanted to ask about finance, specifically fraud. Anytime you look in the media, there's always stuff about benefits fraud, etc. You know, scaremongering of disabled people. I wanted to ask about accountability for the finance provided to transport providers, for example, for concessionary bus passes. Now, I have a disabled person's bus pass that allows me to travel with another person if I need to. Often I travel by myself. There's a lot of times I have travelled by myself where I've used that bus pass and I've seen it, the bus driver press it down as 2 people rather than 1, which I assume then costs more money. It's not happened, it doesn't happen most of the time, it only happens sometimes, but it's happened enough that, you know, I think it's probably representative. And extrapolated over the number of people who are getting concessionary travel, that can add up to quite a lot of money for the government that could be then used for other things, including, you know, providing better services for disabled people. So I just wanted to ask about accountability for the money you provide to those providers. Yeah, thank you.
Good one for Transport Scotland.
Yeah. So I think that will come back to me. So you're right. If the bus driver presses 2 rather than 1 and you're travelling by yourself, we get charged for the 2. So we pay per journey. So we know every single journey that is undertaken on the concessionary card, and we pay accordingly. And that information gets transferred electronically and magically, I think, from the bus drivers, you know, sort of like cab to our own systems. What we do have is a fraud team. And I don't know how they do it, but they are really good at unpicking where they think there's fraudulent cases. Now, for us, it's very difficult to find. If a bus driver's doing it by mistake and there's a one-off, then that's more difficult. But if there's a sort of frequency to it, then they will investigate it. And if they find it's fraudulent, they will pursue it to court. And we have done so, and we continue to do so. I think where you have a situation like that, we have a website as well, a dedicated website, where you can report issues like that, and I would encourage you to do so.
Excellent. The gentleman in the front row here with the blue shirt.
Thank you. My name's Archie. I can walk if I'm in a building. I cannot walk in the pavements in my street. I cannot consequently get to a bus, although I would not be able to board it. What has been spent on pavement renewals in Scotland from the last set of available figures? What I see is that the roads get replaced, but the pavements are remaining the same. The road crest has risen, makes it more difficult for me to cross it. Are those numbers available?
I know she's got some of the numbers. I think the answer to your question is pavements are done by local authorities. So each local authority has its own budget for pavement repairs. And if you would want to find that information, you would go to one of the 32 local authorities, and they would be able to tell you that information under preliminary FOI. But I think you want to use...
I don't have anything.
You don't have anything. Okay. So, but I think that, so that's the answer. But I absolutely agree with your point about the maintenance of payments. Alexander, I think you have a question.
I do. How do you know my name, out of interest?
Because your friend next door mentioned that you were going to ask a question.
Yes. Well, this is for Zara Todd. Yes. Oh, well. Well, I've got a question for Zara Todd. What was it like travelling in the guards' arms when you were were younger?
So, when I was younger, there weren't wheelchair spaces in train carriages. So I had to travel in the guards van, and I'm sure it's something Tanny's experienced as well. And when that was the case, it made you feel like you were a piece of luggage or a piece of post rather than a human being. So we've come a long way in terms of having the infrastructure that we're seen as passengers, but then to go back to what I said earlier, unfortunately, sometimes staff can still make us feel like we're not human beings.
I know.
Yeah.
Okay, I think the lady... Yes, sorry, just too long from you. Just there in the black outfit. Thank you. Hiya.
Thank you. I'd like to circle back to that first question about the rail concessions, because the experience on buses for wheelchair users in some areas of the country and with some companies is so bad that cases are being taken to tribunal with the traffic commissioner, because you said go to the companies and complain to the companies. That's not achieving anything. It's not working. It doesn't achieve anything and people just get fobbed off. And the experience has been so bad for decades now and nobody has listened. I personally have spent a lot of time coming to meetings and raising these issues and nobody has listened. Nobody's done anything about it. So coming back to that first question about rail concessions, wheelchair users on low incomes are shelling out for taxis and trains when they could have got a bus for free. And some of this is short local journeys in rural parts of the country. Some of that is long journeys, like from here to Aberdeen, for example. Somebody who's not a wheelchair user might easily do that on the bus. It's not really feasible on the bus for a wheelchair user. Why are we not getting better rail concessions, particularly now that ScotRail is under public ownership?
Yeah, So in terms of Transport Scotland, what we can look at is the bus concessions, where you have issues over the bus concessions. The rail side is operated by the local authorities and under.
Not for visually impaired people. That's a national.
That is a national. So you're talking about visually impaired. So that we can look at the route that you've gone through the traffic commissioner and the bus users group is the right route in terms of complaints. But in terms of you raising it today, I've got a couple of things that I'd like to take back to the office where I think there's something else we might be able to tie into to have a look at it in a bit more detail. So the best I can say to you today is that I think there's something that we can look at to make sure that it is done right and proper for everybody.
Okay, unfortunately, Zara has to disappear for another meeting, so thank you very much for coming and thank you for your contribution. Unbelievably, for the last 60 minutes, my colleague Pam Duncan-Glance has not said a word, which is a world record. I'm pleased to say that Pam is the Deputy Convener of the cross-party group and I'm one of the regional MSPs for Glasgow. We've had a bad press about Glasgow, Pam. What's your impression? Whoever's got the mic can maybe give it to Pam. What's your impression coming from, the second city of Glasgow from Edinburgh? Oh, we've lost the mic. Oh, sorry. We're having to multitask now.
Hi there, thanks very much, Jeremy, and thank you for chairing this session this morning, which I've really enjoyed. I've been trying to include some of it on social media so that people can follow a little bit of what's been going on. My name's Pam and I represent the first city of the nation, Glasgow, which has been got a bad rep being the second city, Jeremy, the first city. So there's a couple of reflections I have from today. The first is that, yes, there is hope. So when I was younger, I travelled in the guards van, which sometimes was a bit of a pain because suitcases and bikes would fall on me, but then other times I enjoyed it because there were dogs there. So it was just me and the dogs at times, which I quite enjoyed. And now that's not the case. So when I travelled from Glasgow to Edinburgh this morning, it was turn up and go as it should be. Like, I literally did turn up and go. Like, I just went to the station, they got me on the train, got me off the train, and it all went smoothly. But as Tanny says, earlier on, it goes wrong far too quickly. And when it goes wrong, disabled people are reasonable people, right? We are reasonable, despite the fact that we're fighting all the time. If people can just get the basics right, like give us somebody to tell, or somebody to say, this is, you know, I'm stuck on this train, then that would be a lot easier. And I suppose one, if I can indulge in a quick question, Jeremy, but for Transport Scotland, in fact, there's a couple of things in Glasgow. So we've heard a lot about some of the wheeling, cycling and walking. For disabled people in Glasgow, some of the avenues projects and the cycling infrastructure has been really difficult for people with visual impairments. I hosted an event in Glasgow recently where people with visual impairments told me they were taking their life in their hands trying to get across the city. So I suppose my first question on, to Transport Scotland is, what guidance are you giving local authorities, not just to engage with disabled people, but to actually act on what they say? And how involved are disabled people in some of the building and the design? Are they employing people to do this, or just asking them? And the second question I have is, whilst progress has been made, and I'm not having to travel in a guard's van with a dog anymore, although I'd quite like to have the dog bit, in Glasgow, we only have 2 accessible underground stations out of 15, and yet NASA put a wheelchair user on the moon a couple of months ago. So if NASA can get people in wheelchairs on the moon, why can't Glasgow get us across the city? Okay. So those are my questions. Thanks.
Yeah, no, I'll give it a go. So I think, you know, what you've raised about Avenues Project, it is something that we're funding through Transport Scotland, but we work through Glasgow City Council to deliver it. So it's something that we can pick up in our discussions, how they're engaging. They have to engage with all types of groups and disabled groups. I think you're right that, you know, people have been asked rather than paid to engage, but I'll ask that question anyhow. I think in terms of the guidance, it's the cycling by design. We also produced in April 2025 Inclusive Streets that we did work with Des and Max on because we felt that there was more that could be done in terms of making sure that local authorities, in particular when they were designing schemes, because they're responsible for designing them, were signposted to all the best practice that was available out there, and that they were following you know, the best practice in terms of how they engage with different groups at the right time and early enough to make a difference. But I'll follow up with the Avenues project because, you know, Glasgow themselves say that that's their flagship project, so I would hope that they get that right for everybody, but we'll work with them on that. In terms of the access to stations, within the stations, that's a reserved issue for UK government, and they have their Access for All fund to support that. But we also come in alongside to look at accessibility and support that. So again, that's something I'll take back and find out what the plans are, because I don't know what the plans are today, but I'm sure that colleagues will have plans in place.
Okay, our time is almost gone. I'm going to go back to our 2 panellists now and give them maybe 1 minute just to sum up. So, Tanny, do you want to go first? Please.
Yeah, thank you. We just need to all do better. You know, Access for All funding is tiny and it's slow, and we have to be more creative as an industry. So, you know, I'm currently living about 300 yards, from the first railway in the UK. And, you know, at the time it was, you know, transformational, but we haven't caught up. And we should look at other countries around the world and what they've done, and just be really creative and just get people on and off public transport. And it's not beyond the wit of man or woman to be able to do better than we're doing. It just, disabled people don't have a big enough priority in the system. And yeah, it's just better. We can't wait 100 years for this to happen. And final thing I want to say is we just need to get rid of stupid rules about, and, you know, thanks to Pam for doing loads of work in Scotland on this in terms of whether scooter users can get on, you know, trams and trains and things like that. We're stopping, not just because of the infrastructure, we're stopping disabled people from travelling because of stupid rules. And we need to change that. And we need to make Turn Up and Go, which is amazing when it works. We need to make that absolutely, you know, it is a legal right, although some train companies don't want to allow us to use it. You know, we need to have bigger penalties for the companies that do things badly.
Final comment to yourself?
So, yeah, thank you very much for this morning. It's been a sort of real privilege to come here and to listen to just some of the stories and hear about some of the issues. And I know that, you know, we've had nowhere near enough time to really, you know, get to the bottom of, you know, some of the issues and experiences that you've had. But you know, thank you for this morning. I think you know, some of the things that I've picked up on, you know, I know, but, you know, sort of is that there is, as Tani says, you know, not enough funding for everything that we want to do, and, you know, therefore, you know, sort of like we need to, you know, collectively make the most of the funding that is available. We've also, you know, I think heard that, you know, some of it is about good design and getting the design right and making sure that the designers and the people that are responsible for these projects and schemes are working with the right disabled groups and listening to the full range of views and understanding that. I think I've also heard about, you know, just the value of common sense as well, that, you know, it shouldn't be beyond us to get this right for everybody. And also, I think, you know, hearing about some of your experiences with bus drivers, just the importance of being kind and, you know, having empathy. It's not just about training. It's, you know, sort of like being kind when you see everybody, isn't it? So yeah, I just wanted to say, you know, thank you very much for this morning. It's been, you know, really valuable and interesting morning for me.
Well, thank you. And can I thank you all for coming along this morning, giving up your time. My apologies if I didn't get to your question. There's lots of areas that we haven't covered, which would be interesting, which we might do on another occasion. On your way out, can I encourage you, if you could complete the survey, you can do that either with a paper copy, someone will hand you a paper copy, or you can scan a code and just give us some feedback so we can get this event even better for future years ahead. Can I thank our panellists for giving up their time? It's been really interesting to have them all here and to engage with us. Can I thank our BSL interpreters for all their work in regard to that? Again, much appreciated. If you got no further plans, there is, through my garden lobby, you can have tea, coffee, drinks, food. Highly recommend the cheese scone if you're a cheese scone fan. There are also other events going on today and tomorrow. So there may be something that you might be interested in. Do have a look and do come back again. Please do hang around if you want to talk. If you want to know what it was like to travel on a steam train in a guard van, you can talk to Pam about that. She's a lot older than she looks. So thank you all for coming. Hope you've enjoyed this morning and have a good rest of your day.